Aaron Kleibanner and Leah Niebauer, as well as Joanne Phoebe, also with the Department of Planning and Development. And so we're helping to kind of facilitate these community conversations. This is a little bit unique. We've had one meeting where we were going to be going over some nominations that are in the Huntington area that took place back in January. Given the agenda that we had for that meeting, we kind of packed the agenda full with some other items that we actually didn't end up getting to talk about a couple of the nominations. So we wanted to discuss those specifically in a separate meeting since we didn't get the chance to talk about them at the prior meeting. So there will be a little bit of repeat information for those of you that were able to attend that first meeting. We'll have kind of first we'll go over what the comprehensive plan is and a description of the SSPA process. Aaron will lead us through that. We'll try to keep it kind of general, since I think most of the folks that were on this call were actually at that first meeting, but just for those of you that are joining in, and also for those that want to view the presentation later on YouTube, hopefully that'll be educational. And then we'll dive into the nominations. One thing I did mention this to Catherine earlier today, but we actually did just get a withdrawal notice about one of the nominations that we were planning to discuss, which is for the Moon Inn. So we're not going to discuss that nomination since it's been withdrawn from consideration by the nominator. But we do have two nominations to discuss tonight. One is for the Days Inn site at 6100 and 6130 Richmond Highway. And then the other is for Cityside Huntington, which is just up the road and adjacent to it. But once again, Graham Owen, and I am joined by a couple of staff from DPD, and we're very pleased to have you here tonight. This might be a slightly more informal meeting that we've had in the past, just given our attendance. We'd be happy to answer questions along the way. But this is an early opportunity to learn about some of the proposals to change the comprehensive plan in the Northern Richmond Highway corridor, Huntington in particular. So, any questions before we dive in? All right. Well, thank you. So, Aaron, if you want, you could just give a brief overview of the comp plan. I think we could probably keep it more summary for the crowd. But if anybody has any questions about any of the information on the slides, we'd be happy to pause and take questions. So, Aaron, take it away. Thanks.
Thanks, Graham. So, yeah, just to be somewhat more brief this time. So, for the comprehensive plan, for the main ideas that we're going to talk about is that the plan is a guide. It reflects the community's long-term vision. It's used by the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors to make land use decisions, and comes before zoning. And it's again, it's recommendations. It's not the law like the zoning ordinance. It's really, since Fairfax County is such a dynamic area, we're updating it constantly. But it is a requirement of the Commonwealth of Virginia that every jurisdiction have one. And of course, the planning process involves extensive community engagement. So the plan basically has three major parts. There's the policy plan, the area plans, and then there's a number of plan maps. The policy plan contains countywide objectives and policy, and it's divided into a number of elements: land use, transportation, etc. The 4 area plans divide the county up into 4 areas and has more detailed guidance that implements the policy plan goals and objectives. It also divides the county into smaller geographies, planning districts, and community planning sectors. And then there's also special areas or activity centers, we call them as well. And we'll talk about those in a little more detail when we get to the concept for future development. But again, that has more detailed guidance as well. The plan maps include the comprehensive planned land use map, which contains general land use and density intensity recommendations. And then there are 2 transportation plan maps: the overall transportation plan map for future transportation improvements, and the bicycle network plan map for future bicycle facility improvements, the trails plan map, and then of course the plan glossary, which contains commonly used terms. So the concept for future development map really it's the overarching guide for the area plans, and basically it shows where future growth in the county is planned to occur, which is in mixed use centers. various kinds of mixed-use centers. And two examples that we'll be talking about tonight are the transit station areas, the beige areas with the M's here for Metro Rail stations, and then the red community business centers, which is the string of jewels here along Richmond Highway that we kind of talk about. Then the rest of the county is also divided into other activity centers, but these yellow and green areas are the county's residential areas where little to no change is planned. So some common terms that we talk about are density and intensity, and these are terms that refer to the quantity of development on a piece of property. And we'll be using these throughout the presentation. This slide is just showing some common residential densities, and the expression we use here is dwelling units per acre. So you have a common single family, a detached home density on the upper left here, townhouses on the upper right, and then two different common apartment density ranges here for garden apartments and mid-rise. And for non-residential use, the term is intensity. And the expression we commonly talk about is floor area ratio. This is the square footage of the building divided by the square footage of the land that it sits on. And typically a lower number is a less intense, lower intensity. A higher number is a higher intensity, more development on the site. And the other thing with non-residential intensity here is that it can be laid out on a site in different ways. It can go up in height, or you can have a building that is low to the ground but spread out over the land area of the site. But it can, so that's what this figure is kind of illustrating with the same intensity of 1.0 FAR here. So as I mentioned earlier, the plan is a guide, it's not the law. The zoning ordinance is the law and that implements the plan. The zoning ordinance contains more specific standards, such as building heights, building setbacks, open space, things of that nature. And there is also a zoning map, and so there are changes to that map as well. But it's very important, again, that the comprehensive plan is a guiding document that sets forth the community's vision, and that gives really clear guidance about changes to the zoning ordinance. So the way we divide up the work for amending the comprehensive plan is the comprehensive plan amendment work program. And this is a list of all the projects and studies that staff is assigned to work on by the Board of Supervisors. And they adopt the work, the amendment work program. Generally, there are 4 different types of amendments: the countywide policies, as I mentioned earlier, the affordable housing preservation policy that some of you might have seen back at the January 10th meeting. That's an example of one of those. And then there are area-wide studies. Examples of those would have been the Embark Richmond Highway plan and the currently ongoing Lorton Visioning study. Of course, there's the site-specific plan amendment, which we're engaged now. And then there are other board authorizations that can take place at any time during the year, which can also be for specific pieces of property, but they have their own unique timelines and study parameters. So the 2023 site-specific plan amendment process, this can be for a single site or a collection of parcels, and anyone can nominate a piece of property for a change to the comprehensive plan, to the land use recommendations. The SSPA process has been in place since 2017, and last year we underwent an evaluation over the year, and it resulted in some changes that reduced the overall timeline of the review, enhanced community engagement, and basically is achieving a better balance between resources on site-specific amendments and other types of long-range planning studies. Prior to that, some of you might have been familiar with the area plans review process, which this is really based on and was very similar. So the typical stages of the development process are shown on this slide here, and the comp plan is really at the beginning of this process and involves the of proposals or ideas for changes. And we call these nominations within the site-specific plan amendment process. Again, these are the requests to make changes in the comprehensive plan, recommendations for individual sites. Again, anyone can nominate a piece of property for one of these changes. And the first stage of the process was the nomination period, and now we're in the screening period. The purpose of screening is really to consider the nominations that have been submitted at a very high policy level, and that's to determine whether they should be formally evaluated on the work program as plan amendments. And nominations that are added to the work program will be evaluated in detail when they become plan amendments, and either following or concurrent with this formal study, an application for rezoning can also be filed for concurrent review. And then following the review of the zoning application, typically a site plan is submitted and then building permits are pulled for construction. Again, these are all the potential stages in the overall development process. And not necessarily every SSPA nomination will make it to the end of the development review process. So the total number of nominations that the board accepted into the SSPA process was 70. There were 9 total for the Mount Vernon district, as Graham mentioned earlier. Now we're down to 8. And so again, we're in the screening phase of the process. We've been holding a number of different community meetings all around the county during the screening process. The nominations are being grouped based on geography so that people can learn about nominations in their area. And the meetings are really an early opportunity for the public to learn about the nominations, provide comments to staff and the nominators about them, and highlight issues that are particularly relevant to different sites. And we will collect these comments and transmit them to the Planning Commission at the upcoming Planning Commission workshops. And the workshops will be held in lieu of public hearings, and this will allow for more deliberative screening discussion among the Planning Commission members, staff, the nominators, and the public. And that will result in a Planning Commission recommendation on which of the nominations should be added to the work program for further review. And once again, the workshops will be open to the public and community members will be able to participate in those discussions. And finally, when the Planning Commission recommendation is submitted to the board, the work program will be adopted by the board. So basically, in the screening process, we just want to try to get you to think about 3 basic questions. What are your preliminary thoughts? What considerations should be considered if it goes to the next formal evaluation stage? And then are there significant concerns or opportunities that we haven't thought about that should be discussed? But of course, we welcome any feedback that you might have. So this is just a timeline of the process. And of course, here we are in the screening phase now. And then the next step again is the Planning Commission workshops, and the board should take action on the new work program in March or April. So the next steps, staff will again summarize the feedback from the community at the Planning Commission workshops. And that will inform their discussions. And then the public again is invited to come to these. This is the tentative schedule of the Planning Commission workshops on the right side of the slide here. It's possible some of these dates might change. So if a nomination passes screening, the next step again, as we said, is that it's added to the county's 2023 Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program. And the board, when they adopt that work program, they can prioritize the order of the nominations or plan amendments as they become in the order which they'll be reviewed. And based on that, staff will schedule the review of the proposals and the different public engagement opportunities that will be held. If a nomination does not pass screening and it does not get onto the work program, then it could potentially be redeveloped under its existing comprehensive plan recommendations or prior zoning approvals. They could resubmit the nomination in a future cycle of SSPA. However, in that case, we do ask nominators to demonstrate that there's been a change in circumstances or that there is a sufficient justification for the reconsideration of the nomination. So with that, I will go right into the nominations. So again,
Aaron, before you start on that, just want to make sure, does anybody have any questions about process and kind of where we are at this stage during screening? Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
On the Planning Commission workshops, are they going to be held only in public at the county center, or can we do them online?
Yeah, so we're going to finalize the details of that. They're going to be held at the government center for sure. One thing that we're finalizing now is whether or not people can call in. I'm hopeful that people will be able to, participate remotely through that fashion, but they are going to be held in person. We're just trying to figure out that phone connection component as well. So,
well, since the County Board of Supervisors, if I remember correctly, have approved all meetings by the county, whether they be committee or otherwise, have to be done both virtually and in public, this should not be a big issue.
Okay. We'll check with the chairman on Thursday. We're going to be checking in with him to make sure he's on board with this, but we'll have more info as we finish off the week.
Well, remind them of the policy they established. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. It looks like Bill had a question in the chat. When are final staff recommendations sent to the Planning Commission? Good question, Bill. So we're actually looking at the schedule right now. February 22nd, by the way, is most likely going to drop off. I think our most likely outcome is that we're going to start the workshops on Thursday, March the 2nd. That's our most likely outcome. So 1 week in advance is when we'll be publishing our staff recommendation. So look for that most likely on the 23rd of February, so just over about 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Go ahead, Aaron. You can move on to the next nomination.
Okay, thanks, Graham. So as Graham mentioned earlier, the Moon Inn MV009 has dropped out. So we're only going to be covering 2 nominations on the Northern Richmond Highway section here, 007 and 001, Vista Residential and Cityside Exchange. The other nominations in the Mount Vernon district were discussed at the January 10th in-person meeting and on January 19th at a virtual meeting.
Graham, this is Karwan. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, Karwan. Go ahead.
Hi, Graham. This is Karwan. I understand that the nominator for the potential buyer for Moon Inn has withdrawn. I, as the representative of the owners, could we still proceed? Could we raise motion to proceed?
So the nomination has been withdrawn by the nominator. So I got your email literally 5 minutes ago. We're not prepared to discuss the Moon Inn tonight. So it's not on the agenda, so I don't think we're going to be able to discuss it. But if we need to have a discussion about the nature of that nomination, we can do that in the next ensuing weeks.
Okay,
But thank you.
we can do that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first nomination we'll be discussing tonight is MB007 Vista Residential. This comprises 4.5 acres and is located south of the Cityside Huntington nomination. This contains the Days Inn Hotel as well as a swimming pool contractor, and it's located within Land Unit C of the PennDOT Community Business Center and planned for up to 150,000 square feet of office use with a maximum building height of 50 feet. And the nomination proposes multifamily residential use up to 400 dwelling units. And this is the concept plan that was submitted with the nomination. The proposed apartment building it's for up to 400 units, and it's shown as 6 stories with a parking deck up to 7 stories. One thing to note is that there is a substantial grade difference between the Richmond Highway frontage and the grade for the homes at the rear of the site, which are much higher. And this grade change, at least in part, works to the advantage of the proposal in terms of compatibility. However, buffering along this edge is going to need to be carefully considered. Again, this is just an illustrative concept intended to visualize how the development described in the nomination could be developed, but it's not necessarily what it would look like if constructed. And for considerations, it's located approximately a half-mile walk to the Huntington Metro Station and a half-mile walk to a future bus rapid transit station. And again, community business centers are one of the activity centers we mentioned before on the concept for future development. And there are 13 of these in the county, but basically they encourage a mix of uses focused around a core of higher intensity, such as a town center or a main street, and in a pedestrian-oriented setting, and with transitions in intensity and compatible land uses that should protect surrounding stable residential neighborhoods. The Richmond Highway Corridor Area Plan recommends for the PennDOT Community Business Center to concentrate higher development intensities around the bus rapid transit station, planned bus rapid transit station, and with intensities and building heights tapering north and south along Richmond Highway, again, to provide transitions to the suburban neighborhoods. Land Unit C, which this is within, is at the northern edge of the PennDOT CBC, and it's the only land unit in the CBC that does not contain a higher intensity redevelopment option. The nomination supports larger countywide goals for locating housing near public transportation and employment centers, as described in the One Fairfax and Economic Success Plans. And the nomination is next to the low intensity Fairhaven neighborhood. And again, careful attention needs to be paid attention to buffering and screening along that property edge. So now I will turn it over to the nominator for their presentation.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Let me pull this up here. All right, is that showing up?
Yeah.
Yes. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. A couple things. When this thing was first submitted, it was submitted under Vista Residential. It recently changed out in a new group called Trinsic Residential. This is a market rate project that a lot of people have called and asked me some questions. I know there are some affordable projects proposed immediately adjacent to it. This is a market rate project, and I think you'll find Trinsic does a really, really nice project. But so the design has changed a little bit, but we'll kind of get into it. As Aaron noted, we're kind of up in the northern end of the Richmond Highway area. We were a half mile from the metro station. We're a half mile from the center of PennDOT. We're pretty easy walking distance to the metro station. You actually kind of just walk right through there over to through Park. And yeah, we were right next between the Moon Inn and the Bellhaven Towers area. We have two properties. One is the Days Inn, which is an early 1970s hotel. And then we have the Hawaiian Spa, which is a pool contracting company. Collectively, you've got about 4.5 acres, a little more than 4.5 acres of land right there. You got the Fairhaven community here, Moon Inn, you got the Oarsman dealership here, a couple of hotels, and you have the Hunting Towers right there. What's unique about this property, as Aaron alluded to, is the changing grade. We are right on Richmond Highway. When you get down to the Richmond Highway, it's about 90 feet. When you get up to at least over this area here, it's up to 120 feet. So you're looking at a 30-foot change in grade. When you get up here, it's 140 feet. So you're looking at a 50-foot change in grade there. But we're not looking at doing much here, maintaining the buffer. We're gonna be focused on clearing and redeveloping this property right here. What it looks like from the air, again, here's the Hunting Tower, right? This one's about 8 stories. That's the Moon Inn. Unfortunately, the Google Earth kind of compresses a little bit. You've got about 30 feet of change in grade there, about 50 feet of change in grade here. This is the Days Inn. This is the pool company. And this is kind of what we're looking at. Again, this is just a comp plan amendment. What I'm showing here is embryonic, to say the least. This is the very beginning of what we propose. Obviously, as a project move forward, if it does move forward, it would probably change considerably what these projects do. But we're looking to keep it to about 5 stories. Have interior parking, so the parking is completely screened. Interior amenities. Looking at probably maintaining the dog park area there, maintaining the buffers here. It should be a really attractive and nice project. Under this particular proposal here, it comes out to about 376 units, not really 400. We're asking, the comp plan amendment is just for 400. So you have area to work within. But we're looking for this design comes to about 376. The mix of studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. Obviously, as the project moves forward, it'll change. They always do. But as I said before, Trendsic does a really nice project. The average unit size on this is about 887 feet. So these are actually, in terms of the way things go these days, these are actually fairly big units. Moving down here, this is kind of looking at it from the northwest. Again, there's the Moon Inn. So you see, this would be the Hunting Towers. This is the buffer line you have here. And this is what it would look like from that perspective. Again, you have 8 stories over here. You have 50 feet change in grade here, 30 feet change in grade here. You have a little flat area there, and then you get into the Moon Inn. That's Richmond Highway. About Trinsic Room, like I said, they're a developer of high class, Class A multifamily communities. It's not an affordable housing project, but we would require provide the ADUs and WDUs if this project moves forward, by code. But this is going to be a market rate project. We can give you the website. I encourage you to take a look at it. They do some very, very nice projects. This is just a couple examples I pulled off the web there. They are a nationwide developer. They've been in business for a while, and they got over 20,000 units. So you're talking about some very experienced and very well-equipped financing and execution ability. So turning over the next thing, again, as Aaron pointed out, we are in land unit C of the PennDAW, the CBC. Right now, it recommends about 150,000 square feet of office use, the maximum height of 50 feet, buildings oriented towards Richmond Highway, substantial consolidation of lots. What's changed since all that language came out there? Well, unfortunately, we had a pandemic. We've also, before the pandemic, even before that, office and retail were changing to begin with. As we know from the report that the EDA published on Richmond Highway back about February of 2021, there was no foreseeable office market for the next 10 years. So understanding that the core recommendation is not probably a viable use, and this is an opportunity to frankly kind of clean this property up, provide a kind of attractive front on Richmond Highway, contribute to the various housing plans the county wants in terms of, and maintain housing affordability from a general sense in terms of affordability, number of units, and also really kind of reinforcing the boundary between Richmond Highway and the Fairhaven community. It was time for a change, and we look at some of the other things that have happened in the area. The Embark plan comes there and created the series of CBCs. And this is just the tail end of the CBC, but this will provide some additional housing from there and also approximate the metro. It will also be close to one of the BRT stations. The BRT is moving forward. And then lastly, like I said, we're about a half mile from the Huntington Metro. The Huntington Metro is really replanned as well too. So, complements, although an appropriate scale, the TOD development plan for there, kind of scaling down, but being appropriate for what you'd expect on a highway like Richmond Highway and proximate to the metro. again, we're only looking at this point very, very high level. You know, the plan I showed you there beforehand is kind of a very first draft. Look at that. And obviously, if we go forward, we got to do an iterative process with ourselves, the community, and the various stakeholders in the area. But what we're asking for in terms of comp plan recommendation is to make a recommendation for, you know, multifamily, high quality multifamily, on-site amenities, internal structured parking facility, you know, maximum of 400 units and maximum building height of 5 to 6 stories. You know, we think that particularly given the change in grade, that'll be appropriate and not excessive. We note that the Hunting Towers are 8 stories over there. The current recommendation was for 5 stories for office, so it's kind of in keeping with what you would expect in terms of building height and what's appropriate when you get right up to Richmond Highway. So with that, that's the end of our presentation. I'm happy to take any questions or, you know, anybody looking for any additional information, talk about that.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark. Ellen, let's see, your hand is up. Oh, and for folks for those of you that are on the call and would like to speak, we use the raise hand function in Teams. So there's just a little hand button. Just click on that and that'll let us know that you'd like to speak. And if you're on the phone, by the way, if you're calling in by phone, unfortunately, there isn't an easy way to raise your hand in Teams. So just come off of mute and state your name, and we'll be able to call on you that way. So, Ellen, go ahead.
Okay, Mark, any chance, not that this, you know, is really that relevant to a comp plan change, but any chance that these are going to be for sale instead of rental?
Unlikely. Very unlikely. I mean, as long as I would have to let the Trinsic folks there, but Trinsic has 20,000 units that they own and have developed. They're very large. I mean, good thing about that is you don't have a situation where, you know, a for sale unit gets underfunded and you have probably a situation where people may not have the ability to keep things up. You've got a very, very large, well-funded entity, you know, continuing to keep the project up. But yeah, I think at this point it's really a rental project.
Well, that's unfortunate. Maybe you could rustle up some people who want to do some for sale units.
We're happy to talk to them. I mean,
Okay.
they have representatives monitoring. As we get into the process, you know, happy to chat.
Catherine, go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, right now, embedded in the Days Inn, there is the most wonderful little pastry shop, sandwich place. Can't think of the name of it. Are you intending, or your clients intending to do anything like that might be available, access to the public? And the other question, let me ask it, is when you show your visuals, there's lots of green space. Could you speak to the green space that might be left when you do almost 400 units?
Sure. Yeah. Two things. One with the pastry shop, and right now this is planned for 100% residential. You know, we can certainly talk, you know, about see whether there's a non-residential component or something in the area. The challenge you're going to have is when you take down the hotel to begin the construction, you're going to eliminate the pastry shop at that point, and you're looking at probably about a 2-year build out on something like this. So unfortunately, the pastry shop may have found a new home during that time. But, you know, again, as this project moves forward, if we do move forward, you know, I think they're happy to talk about anything.
Okay, thank you.
And with regard to the open space, I'd note that, you remember we were talking about the area where right now the area is largely kind of paved from one end to the other, except for that hill. When you start getting up there, all right, you can't really do a lot of clearing, and you can't really make a lot of use of an angle of a hill like that. Right now, that area serves as a pretty nice buffer as well. Obviously, as we go through that, we need to work with park, you know, the urban forestry folks and stuff. And sometimes what looks as a nice buffer is also invasive. We don't know, but, you know, the goal is not to go down and go clear cutting all those trees, you know. But we would provide modern stormwater management controls. I should have brought that up too, because this thing's paved from one end to the other. And yeah, I think the newest construction on this site is 1973.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next up is Jason Zaragoza. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Graham. Hey, Mark, I think you, first of all, apologize for not having my camera on. You caught me sneaking in dinner. You know, I think you know what one of the questions from Huntington is going to be, and that's along the lines of what Catherine said, is retail. Is there any, does this developer have any other properties where they have retail incorporated in there? What do you see as is that even a possibility?
I mean, I think something we can consider as we go forward. You know, they have, as I said, with 20,000 units and a whole bunch of projects. I'm sure that there's some areas where you have mixed use in there. It's a question is just really kind of where retail might be viable, might not be viable. But you know, if people want to look at retail as we move forward, you know, there's certainly an opportunity to, as part of the comp plan process. Like I say, we are literally we're at step, not even step 1, we're at step 0.5. You know.
Right. Yeah, and I guess because the thing is all of these proposals, they all cite the mixed use that's supposed to be encouraged in this area, and everyone's passing the buck on the retail to someone else. And I just feel like with all these new residents coming up here, at what point do we not have the density enough to make that retail economically viable? Because otherwise everyone's just coming in here for the residential. And I mean, I think on balance, in general, we would be supportive of this. I think we're happy to see something replace the Days Inn, but that we're going to have so many more people in here and nowhere for them to shop and eat. And it just seems that every proposal just seems to push that off and hope that someone else will be the one that brings the retail.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to move forward, let's talk about it. Yeah.
Okay.
No one's saying no. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that, Jason. Next is Kay Chamberlain. Kay?
Yes. Hi. And this may be a question kind of for the committee and, for Mark here. I am obviously in full support of, a renovation of some of these structures on Route 1. However, I reside off of North Kings Highway, and a huge concern for me is the amount of, traffic that is already, the structures that have already been going up next to the metro. And, this building, looking at almost 400 units, if I did the math correctly, almost 600 parking spots. What are, I guess, the thoughts, or, how are you planning to, like, our roads and our, how are we planning to deal with the influx of all of these, these people and the speeding kind of issues that were already, and the noise? Is there any, has any thought been given to that?
Those are all good questions, and frankly, those are all the kind of things you do that are kind of central to this process. You're looking at what's the impact on parks, schools, things like that, and road transportation particularly. We would have to, as part of this process, if it goes forward, there is a transportation analysis that moves forward. And, the question that we have is, what roads, what intersections, where would traffic from this impact? It's probably unlikely it's going to impact North Kings Highway too much. It's going to be mostly Richmond Highway. But you also have that intersection right down the street from there. What's the impact there? What's the impact of the proximity to the BRT? What's the impact of the proximity to the metro station? All this stuff has to be analyzed. And it's not just we, as the applicant, would work with a traffic consultant to come up with a report. That would have to be vetted by county staff. County staff would say, we believe this, we don't believe that. Change this, don't change that. And then also goes out to the community, and the community has input on there as well. And so, very often you have a project that starts off looking like A, and by the time you get done with it, it looks like L or M or something like that. And so, and it does that in response to various considerations that arrive and constituencies that are interested in one factor or another, or things you may not have anticipated first. Traffic's going to be fully vetted in this, so it's a good question.
And also going kind of off of Jason's point, I believe it was Jason that was saying, for us not really having necessarily like the retail or the restaurants, but yet, having the increase in people, kind of what are the advantages, for us that are already here that are then having to deal with kind of, the, not saying that we don't want the renovation, but a little bit maybe of a trade-off to get some of those retail spots or restaurants. Just something to be mindful of.
As we go forward, also, it's not just these kinds of meetings, it's also going out and meeting with the various communities too. So I mean, we're happy to do that. We like doing that, because sometimes you get some really good ideas.
Great, thank you.
And Kay, one thing I'll just add is one of the benefits of doing this SSPA cycle, where we look at these proposals, at a set point in time, is that in some instances, and this happened actually here with the Huntington nominations, is that you get to look at proposals that are in close proximity to one another. And that if they're all added to the work program for further review allows you to do, a more cumulative analysis of the net change that would be represented by each of these individual nominations. So if this is advanced for further review, as well as the city side nomination, which is the one we'll talk about after this, if both of those are advanced for further review, I think given that they both came in at the same time, we'd want to make sure that we're looking at, what would be the planned, what's the planned development, potential and the impacts that are associated with both of those nominations at the same time, including compared to some of the changes that you've talked about. For example, right up the way, North Kings Highway, nearer to the Huntington Metro Station. So
yeah, it's just it ends up being kind of a cut through, I think, a lot of times too, because Route 1 does get quite congested at certain times at certain intersections, and also with the South Alex complex opening with the Aldi. I would be interested to see if there wasn't kind of a way to kind of mitigate, some of that congestion.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think if this is added to the work program, we definitely take a look at traffic operations, if not doing a full blown, TIA if it's warranted given the volume of trips.
Right. Yeah, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Next is Lynn Pasco. Lynn, go ahead. Lynn, we can't hear you. You're off of mute, but we're not hearing you, sir. Lynn, if you can hear us, we can't hear you right now. I'll send you an email with the phone call in, and you can try to call in that way if that works for you. But we'll move on to Alexis for now while we try to get that organized. Alexis, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, great.
We can hear you fine. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much for doing this tonight. So the height limit or the number of stories was 6 stories for this proposal. Is that correct?
6 stories right now. We're practically looking at 5, but 6
At
is
5?
next. Is what we're
Okay.
asking for. Yeah.
I'm wondering. I'm surprised to hear that it's so low, since the neighboring apartment complexes like Cityside and Montebello, are in the 10 to 11. I think Montebello is even higher than that. I understand the concern and need to taper and consider the neighboring residencies and buffering and all that. But also, I think it's appropriate in a CBC and with the proximity to the metro to have a higher intensity, and to put some of more housing in these transit-oriented areas where the neighboring properties have that kind of density. So I'm wondering why perhaps you're considering such a lower height limit on this site.
I think this is part of it. We get the kind of iterative process. We're almost trying to pre-anticipate what the committee reaction would be. And Alexis, you hit the nail on the head. It was just kind of looking, kind of stepping down, looking at, you've got, what's going to be planned at Metro, and you got the Huntington Towers, you got Montebello stepping down to Huntington Towers stepping down. And remember, yes, we have a very significant change in grade, about 30 feet to 50 feet, but we also directly abut single family homes. And so again, what you're seeing right here is just kind of a first draft, but it was our attempt to kind of try and strike that balance in terms of not having things looming over single family homes and providing an appropriate transition.
Okay, well, I'm probably in the minority opinion, but I'd encourage you to go bigger. Thanks.
Thank you, Alexis. Let's see if we can try to get Lynn back on. Lynn, can you hear us? We see that you're unmuted, Lynn, but I'm not hearing you. Lynn, I just sent you an email to your co.chair email address. So check that, and that contains the actual phone number. So if you want to call in from your cell phone, you can dial into the meeting, and you can just come on mute and say that you're Lynn, and we'll be able to hear from you. Okay. Yeah. we'll try it that way, Lynn, and maybe we'll move on to the next item unless others have any specific questions about days in. But we'll get back to you, Lynn, if we're able to. All right. Did anybody have any other questions? I'm going to look at the chat real quick. Okay. There's no other questions. Aaron, I think we can probably move on. And Lynn, again, we'll try to get you back on the call and we'll circle back to you. So thanks.
Okay. The next nomination is MV001, the City Side Exchange, also the site of the current Huntington and Metro apartments. It comprises 15 acres and approximately 569 total existing units, again located south of the Montebello condominiums and directly east of Mount Eagle Park. It's north of Mark's nomination, and this is located within Land Unit Q of the Huntington Transit Station area, and the inset map on the lower left shows Land Unit Q in the blue box there. And the map shows the other land units within the Huntington TSA. The adopted comprehensive plan is for residential use at a density of 35 to 40 dwelling units per acre, and the nomination proposes residential use at a density up to 50 to 65 dwelling units per acre, and that the new units are committed long-term affordable housing. And this is the concept plan submitted with the nomination. And this is for up to 375 new multifamily units in 2 buildings that would sit on the existing parking lots that front along Richmond Highway, and also a parking garage. This is just a rendering of what the buildings could look like. And the existing 569 units will be preserved as affordable housing through the partnership with Amazon, their housing equity fund. And these are the long-term AMI affordability restrictions for those. And so the consideration again are pretty similar to the last nomination, a third of a mile. This is closer to the Huntington Metro Station, but the same distance to the planned bus rapid transit station. The Huntington TSA again is a mixed use center. It's planned for densities and intensities at levels designed to support ridership for the Metro Rail and to provide convenient access to the Metro Station for pedestrians and bicyclists. And the nature of the nomination is supportive of goals and objectives to provide housing for persons with a range of incomes and of differing abilities, again, found in county policies such as One Fairfax and the community-wide housing strategic plan. There's also the pending affordable housing preservation policy plan amendment I mentioned earlier, and should that be adopted by the Board of Supervisors, this nomination might meet the performance criteria described in that policy plan amendment, which would make the necessity of a plan amendment or relieve the necessity for the plan amendment. So the nominators, because this nomination was presented on January 12th at the in-person meeting at Whitman Middle School, they are not here tonight, but we can try to answer any questions you might have. And if not, we can also get their contact information out to you.
All right, go ahead, Alexis.
Thank you. Are you able to explain a little bit more about the housing amendment, that if that housing amendment goes through, then is this nomination for this SSPA not necessary, or I might be a misunderstanding?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do my best, and I'll drop a link to the staff report, which actually was published just earlier this week about it, because we'll be going to the Planning Commission very soon. So there is a pending policy plan amendment to the housing element. So this is a comprehensive plan policy element that deals with housing policy, just kind of writ large. And what the preservation amendment is looking at is, really trying to, preserve the affordability of existing committed and what we call market affordable properties throughout the county. So in this instance, you have an existing, high-rise building, and the rents, across all of the city side average out to be less than 60% of the area median income. And so there are a couple of them are also at 80% of the AMI, as this slide indicates. So what the preservation policy plan amendment, is indicating is that in some instances, there's kind of a worry, within the community that in some instances, existing committed and existing market affordable properties will lose their affordability levels, just as rents increase over time. And so what the preservation amendment is intended to do is to provide one incentive. It's not the be all end all, but it's one incentive to ensure the preservation of long-term affordability. And so one of the ways that could take place is when you have existing market affordable properties such as Cityside, in some instances allowing increased densities above what the plan currently calls for. And so this instance where you have two new residential buildings that would be developed in a parking lot, so no displacement of units, for example, that are on the site today. That's the kind of thing where in exchange for a commitment to preserving existing units on the site, there can be a conversation at the time of the rezoning about whether or not increased densities above current guidance could be supported. So it's one of these things that really kind of needs to be addressed on a site-by-site basis. So there isn't a specific thing that says you get double your density or triple your density. What it does indicate, though, is that there's this willingness on the county's end to consider additional densities that could support the goal of preserving existing market affordable rental units. But that's kind of a brief summary of it. I'll drop a link to the staff report in the chat for anyone that's interested in it, because that contains both the policy as well as some of the data that we've been looking at and tracking over time. Because as you probably are aware, rents change over time. And so that 60% AMI threshold, which we use to determine affordability, there are certain properties that go above that and then dip down and go back up, over time. So being able to track that and ensure that we're, really targeting the units that are, that are affordable over time is kind of one of the key things that we, have as a takeaway from the study that we did looking at preservation. So hopefully that helps. I'll drop more information in the chat for you, though, because that one thing this doesn't allow somebody to skip a rezoning. You still have to go through a rezoning public process, public hearings, et cetera. But it just wouldn't necessarily need a plan amendment in advance of that rezoning application.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. EM Slappy had a question in the chat. Does this mean that Cityside and possibly Days Inn could be moving forward at the same time? Potentially, I think it really kind of depends on their own individual development timelines. In terms of the county's review, if both of these are added to the work program, which means that it advances to the next stage, a formal analysis, those would be looked at most likely at the same time, unless, of course, this nomination doesn't end up needing a plan amendment because it's covered by the preservation amendment. So they might be reviewed simultaneously. It just might be in different forms. This one, for example, could be at a rezoning stage, while the other Days Inn would require a plan amendment. So potentially, yes. Let's see, Joe Candle, go ahead.
Hi, my question is somewhat detailed, maybe much too early in this process, but I do want to point out that the two new buildings do not front on Richmond Highway. They front on an access road, which is actually a Virginia state highway. And based on the earlier plans that I've seen, they come right up to the edge. The issue we wonder about is whether pickup and drop-offs to these two buildings will, in effect, permanently block one lane of the state highway, which unfortunately is the egress from Montebello to a light to get to Richmond Highway.
No, that's a good thing to bring up now. I appreciate that. So we'll make sure that that is flagged if this is advanced for further review. So you're indicating, is it, coming out of Montebello, it's the exit lane so that you can get out onto Richmond Highway? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, there's actually a stoplight that most of us use. So we come towards City Side, we get to the stoplight, we make a left to the stoplight, and then we can get out into Richmond. If we go the other direction out of Montebello, we do get to an access, but it's risky. There's no light, so you have to fight to cross traffic if you want to go north.
No, thank you for flagging that for us. I appreciate it. I don't think we have somebody from DOT on our call, but I'll make sure that comment gets passed along to them so they're aware of that. So.
One more comment.
Yeah.
The daily school buses to City Side usually take up to 10 minutes to load and unload, and they do it on the access road. So that's another issue.
Thank you. Yeah, we heard that comment at the Whitman meeting as well. So we're tracking that one definitely because we're aware of that issue. So thank you for those. I appreciate it. Catherine, go ahead.
Thank you very much. My comment is more from an aesthetic perspective. I don't know what is going on with developers these days, and I don't know what's going on with the county staff. The fact of the matter is the entrance to Richmond Highway really symbolizes George Washington, the historic area of Mount Vernon. And what we are finding constantly are these very hideous, contemporary, modern, God knows what buildings. And I think you all need to take those into consideration. The picture you showed us looks like the local prison. That is absolutely hideous. And you say it's just a notion, but we end up with the Parker that has, instead of blue, it's orange. We're ending up with a whole bunch of these kind of places. So I would like the staff and the historic portions of the staff and the Board of Supervisors to take a look at that and start requiring these developers to do things that are more in keeping with the history of the Mount Vernon area. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Catherine. Appreciate it. Yeah, this is the initial submittal from the nominator, so we'll make sure that
Well,
comment
tell them
is passed
shame
along.
on them.
I'll pass along the comment. No, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Alexis, go ahead.
Two more questions for me. The Parking Reimagined process is going on right now. Are on this and the other Days Inn property, are they accounting for the potential reduction in parking requirements that might be as a result of that process?
That's a great question. I don't know if we've received formal parking counts on this one or on Days Inn. I know Mark hopefully is still on the call and could answer in terms of the parking maximums if they've established it at this point. But Aaron, could you flip back to the okay, so they've got units identified, but yeah, Catherine, excuse me, Alexis, I don't believe that they've done a formal analysis at this stage to determine, their parking yield. But we can check on that just to make sure that it's in alignment with, the goals for Parking Reimagined.
Okay, thanks. My second question was, today, Cityside has an access point to Mount Eagle Park that you can access from the service road or from Richmond Highway. And I'm hoping that, is there a plan to allow that public access to continue once these buildings are potentially built?
Yeah, that was one of the questions we had asked the nominator when we initially talked to them about this, was that's their best access, so to speak, to Huntington, off to the to the metro station. So yeah, that's a great comment. Going through those woods back there. I think some of the connections due to the grade change as well as just the surface back there. It can be it's it's not in the best shape, right? And so I think getting a better connection through there and evaluating that as a part of a planning study would be certainly advantageous. So I think we're right there with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's a main connection point for me getting on my bike from one side to the other when Huntington Avenue is a little too scary to ride on sometimes. So it's a nice way to make that connection. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for the comment. John, go ahead.
This is really to Alexis. I believe we were told that the parking garage would approximately equal the number of spaces that currently exist that are going to get blown away by the two buildings.
Okay, thank you.
All right, want to do a check real quick, see if Lynn Pasco, I still see you on the call, but I can't hear you. Lynn, can you hear us? Lynn, you're off of mute, and we see your light flashing, but no, unfortunately we can't hear you. Can anyone else hear Lynn? Just checking. No.
Yeah, no, I can't. But Lynn, if you want to call me, then you can tell me what you want to say and I can say it. So either phone.
I made the same offer by email and he has not replied to me.
Joanne, go ahead.
Hey, I was just going to add that one thing that's interesting about this project is just up the street is Riverside Development. And just a few years ago, Riverside was approved for a similar type of scheme where they have 3 residential buildings approved within their parking lots and are converting the same parking spaces into development sites. And I think they've done some early site plans to start to move that project forward, but I just think it's interesting. We're not seeing that everywhere, but but now we have a couple in the same vicinity, and it's a very good use of reuse of land that we certainly don't want a lot of existing parking lots floating around. So I can share plans of that with anybody who wants to see what that would ultimately Riverside would look like. So.
Thanks, Joanne. Appreciate that. Yeah, if you want to drop them in the chat, that'd be terrific, so we can take a look at them. Anyone else? And I don't know, Ellen, if you're able to get Lynn on. No. Okay. Well, Lynn, unfortunately, since we can't hear you, feel free to email.
I'm talking to Lynn now, and
okay.
he's given me a rough idea of what he wants to say, but
okay.
He's going to email you.
Okay.
He's tried your phone number. Nothing's working.
Okay.
Oh, but the bottom line is he thinks the Vianney project is fabulous. Yay. And that we're just overloading too much of the low income housing, the affordable housing in big clumps in certain areas of the highway, but he will email you.
Okay. Thank you, Catherine.
Yep.
Lynn, sorry we weren't able to make the connection formally on the call, but that comment has been noted, so thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed what Joanne was saying because I was yakking with Lynn. Joanne, would you talk about Riverside again, please? What did you say?
Yeah, I was just saying that it's a similar concept in that not the affordable aspect of it, but a similar concept in that they're infilling 3 of their parking lots with additional residential. One is sort of a liner building that wraps the corner of Huntington Avenue on their property into Old Richmond Highway, Yeah. And then the other 2 sort of sit within the development parcels in the 2 big parking lots between the 3 sort of T buildings. And what's nice about it is that it's just a reuse of the parking lot, and they're just taking those parking spaces and putting them into a garage. So very similar concept to this. And I was looking for the easiest way to share the plans. So.
But are they ever going to do anything? Because this has been approved so many years ago, and everything is just dead stop. What's going on?
Yeah, I did talk to I forget his name now, Ed Murr. maybe about 6 months ago, and they actually do have a site plan in for approval. They have a lot of infrastructure that they have to move around on site, and they do have a site plan in. And he had indicated that he was moving forward in this year. So we'll see. It would be a slow process. They're not doing all the buildings at once. So.
Well, those of us who fought real hard for this over the years are getting old, and we'd sure like to see some of this stuff come to fruition.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Well, thank you for that, Joanne. Appreciate that.
Can I ask a question? The
Yeah,
young
go ahead, Kathy.
lady, Carawan, did you say that you were representative of the owners of the Moon Inn?
Hi, Catherine. Yes.
Well, let me share with you that the Mount Vernon Council of Citizens Associations would love nothing better than to see that property taken down and new stuff built there for lots of reasons. And where are you as representing the owners? What is happening since they pulled out of this process? What could you share with us what's going on?
Sure. Thank you for raising that, Catherine. And that's good to hear that the neighborhood would like to see that development. So do we. So it is shared between 3 owners, and in the background there are discussions to buy out the other one, and so where we can streamline and make the decision making easier. It is costly to keep that thing open, and like the carry-on costs, and so we'll come back to the board here. We will propose or nominate ourselves, and we'll go forward ourselves. So we are trying to figure out in the background here as to who will lead this, who will acquire who, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, well, hurry along, because it's a very tainted property because of some things that occurred there that I'm sure you're quite familiar with, that distressed most of the citizens that live around here. So, we wish you luck, but we would like very much to see this move along as quickly as possible.
I agree, and I appreciate your support. Maybe at some point I'll send whoever's an obstacle so you can whip them along, Catherine.
Well, I don't know who the obstacle is, because the Mount Vernon Council of Citizens Associations represents 15,000 human beings that live around this corridor, and we are all for this thing going away.
Right. No, I meant from our end, not from the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Carwan. Let's see. Yeah, one thing in the chat. Sonia Brihi is indicating it's great to see replacement of parking lots with more homes. Thank you for that comment, Sonia. And I think we're about wrapped up. Are there any closing thoughts from anybody about either of the nominations or anything about kind of next steps? Before we break, we'll indicate, we'll reiterate rather. We are most likely to begin the Planning Commission workshops at this point, most likely on March the 2nd. So just keep an eye on the track and nomination page. We're going to update that most likely on Thursday or Friday with kind of the roster and when we're going to actually be reviewing the nominations for the Mount Vernon district, as well as the Franconia district and others nearby very, very soon. So we had hoped to have that information up sooner, but here we are, and we're hoping to be able to do that as soon as we possibly can. So I'll drop a link to that website for you. It's the track and nomination page, and it's a great way to follow along with all 68 of the nominations that are going on across the county. Garrett, go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Graham. Yeah, I just wanted to sort of chime in real quick at the end. I live in the Fairhaven neighborhood behind the Moon Inn and Days Inn, and there's several of us on this call from that neighborhood. We're trying to get our sort of community association reinvigorated and organized. But in the meantime, we are talking as a neighborhood, and I think generally supportive of these projects and the Moon Inn redevelopment. We're sad to see that dropped off for the time being, but I think there's support here for redeveloping those, and we're happy to be part of the process moving forward. I think the one comment I would make that I heard tonight that we would probably have a little bit of concern with is raising the height of the Days Inn property. I think right now it's probably an appropriate height for our neighborhood and the homes that are directly behind it. But I know it's a long way to go in the process, but that's just one comment I wanted to add in.
Thank you for that, Garrett. Appreciate it, and appreciate your efforts to you know, kind of reinvigorate, as you said, the Fairhaven Community Association. That's terrific. Go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
Say, Garrett, can you follow up with me afterwards? We'd love to be able to talk to your community.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we had a little bit difficulty finding the right person, so finding someone. But yeah, you got a great meeting place, but with the point of contact, they're all. Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
And Garrett, I know you're in a different district. I believe you're in Franconia district. Am I correct in that?
No, we are in the Mount Vernon district.
Oh, good. Well, with that being said, please tell your folks to show up on Saturday to the town hall meeting. Come to the Mount Vernon Council's table. We'll provide, because you all used to be members, and we'll provide you with all the stuff you need and introduce you to the crew of the Mount Vernon Council, because we can all work together when there's lots more of us doing this stuff.
Yep. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. We really appreciate your time. And if you have any comments or questions that you weren't able to that you just didn't include today during the meeting, feel free to email us. My email address is right here, as well as Aaron's, and you can email us at aaron.clybanner@fairfaxcounty.gov and me at graham.owen@fairfaxcounty.gov. And we'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. If there are questions for the nominators, we'll be able to get you their contact information as well. And then also, if you have any comments that you'd like to present to the Planning Commission, we can relay those as well. So really appreciate everybody's time tonight. Thank you so much for coming out, and we'll see you hopefully at the Planning Commission workshops in just about a month.
Thanks, Graham. Good job, Aaron, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.